Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, October 26th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Penn State game is in 3 days, the game against Michigan in 31 days. 3 days against Penn State means we are 2 days away, Kevin Noon, from getting in the car and driving to Penn State, which is not, it is not always the most incredible scenic drive. It's not bad this time of year, but it should be a really interesting football game we get to cover this weekend, and we got to talk on Tuesday afternoon with Ryan Day, Jim Knowles, Kevin Wilson, lots of interesting stuff to talk about coming out of those interviews. Let's start, I guess, with Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Obviously has been the health of Jaxon Smith-Njigba and will he or won't he play. That has kind of been this recurring story all fall. And after the Iowa game, Ryan Day said, no, he wasn't hurt again. It was a pitch count thing. What did he have to say on Tuesday with an update on all of that?
Well, he doubled down, and it was a pitch count thing. There wasn't any other injury going on. Expectations are that he's going to play. Now, with Wednesday practice and Thursday practice and best Fridays in football and a bus ride and everything else, could he get injured along the way? Sure. But the expectation is that he's going to play. So either, we were looking at something that was a non-story in terms of JSN coming up and looking like he was kind of dealing with a little bit of a hammy after that run for that pass that ended up going out of bounds, or Ryan Day is just tripling down. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, so far it was. I was expecting it. Well, they've evaluated him further, and maybe he's not going to go. That was very much not the case. It sounds very, as of Tuesday afternoon, as of what Ryan Day had to say, it sounds like they're planning on having Jaxon Smith-Njigba play. And he was asked, okay, will he be on a bigger pitch count? It was like, well, that still has to be evaluated. Will the pitch count go up as you're sort of trying to ramp him back up? Will it go from 20 plays to 30 or 40? That's still kind of TBD. That's all evaluated by the medical staff. And, Ryan Day actually talked about that a little bit and talked about how they have these trackers and they evaluate how many yards has he run, how many yards has he run at a high-speed clip, how much flexibility and strength is there in all these different muscles after practice. Is it sort of a normal decrease and all that kind of stuff? So it is a very, very sports science-y kind of process to determine what he can and can't do. We'll see what the sports science process determines later on in the week. A little less scientific is just, hey, playing in Beaver Stadium, that's sometimes not that easy. Ohio State in 2016 had a not very good experience there. No one really there on this team, at least on the player side, not Ryan Day either, was there for that one. 2018 had that big comeback win with the long touchdown to Ben Victor, the game-winning touchdown to KJ Hill in front of that whiteout crowd. And then 2 years ago, 2020, it was night. It should have been the whiteout crowd, but no one was there. So this is kind of going to be, even though it's not the prime time, even though it's not a whiteout, this is still going to be kind of a different and unique challenge because a lot of these guys have not been in front of a Penn State crowd, period, no matter what time of day or what color they're wearing.
I was going to say, are the fans not allowed to wear white to this game since it's not a whiteout?
Yes, they have to go. They will go to jail if they do that.
All right,
yes.
well, I just want to make sure. Yeah, it's going to be a very big environment, regardless of whatever label you have on this, the whiteout game, the stripe-out game, whatever. I was going back and I rewatched the Penn State-Minnesota game, and there were a lot of pre-snap penalties on Minnesota. The offensive line was jumping. There were a couple of offsides on the defense. So, I mean, it's going to be real. It is a very difficult environment. Ohio State fans will make it to this game, but even differently than Michigan, Michigan fans, a lot of them still will kind of dump their tickets, and there might be 20,000 Ohio State fans. The Ohio State section is way up in the rafters, especially if the band is going and they get like the good lower seats, and the fans are way up. I mean, the parents have always told me stories about how they're stuck up there. And it's going to be real sparse where all the rest of the Ohio State fans are. So there's not going to be much of a reprieve. So they've got to go in. They've got to be disciplined. They have to play a cleaner game than they have in a lot of their previous games. And it also wouldn't hurt to get out to a quick start and try and take the crowd out of it.
Mm-hmm. And, you wondered if they lost last week to Minnesota, would that really suck the life out of the fan base and open up a bunch of, lower the enthusiasm level and thus the volume level, and also perhaps increase the number of Ohio State fans there? Well, they whomped Minnesota pretty good. So I don't think that will be the case. Should be a very lively atmosphere there. And, in terms of mistakes, CJ Stroud has made a few. Now, he's been pretty good overall, but he has made a few, and he had an interception last week, and he's had one in Michigan State that was run back for a touchdown. And Ryan Day was asked, so when you are trying to talk to him during a game, like how do you evaluate that? How do you balance the fact that you want to talk to him about this stuff with not overwhelming him with too much information? What did Ryan Day have to say about that?
Yeah, he doesn't want to put a lot of noise in his head. I mean, there certainly are ways of where you can sit there and kind of express, something that happened or whatnot, but you're not going to get into this thing of where you're going to overanalyze it at that point and get a young quarterback overthinking about things, dwelling on things, having it bother him for his next 15 throws. So you have to kind of be able to adjust and work with that, and that's one of those challenges, because maybe different players might handle things a little bit differently of how they want that kind of immediate response. And it sounds like with CJ Stroud that Ryan Day is not necessarily on top of him. CJ Stroud has got a lot of experience now. I mean, just a short year ago, we were talking about, he's a first-year starter. Well, now he's a second-year starter. And in college football, that's like being a 20th-year starter, because of just the way that the churn and the cycle goes. So Ryan Day seems to have found the best way to work with CJ in terms of getting that immediate response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he said you just kind of got to default to your preparation, and you got to trust the preparation that they've done the work during the week, and they're ready to go on Saturday, and you sort of default to that, and you don't try and change too much or overwhelm them during the course of the game. One of the things that he is, while CJ Stroud is watching his film this week, he's going to be watching a lot of Penn State's cornerbacks, and Kevin Wilson was asked about those guys and the challenge that those guys provide, because they have a couple good corners. They've got, one's a little bigger name than the other, but I mean this is probably going to be the best pair of cornerbacks that Ohio State has faced so far this year.
And it may be the best tandem that they face all season, to be quite honest. And we all want to talk about Joey Porter Jr. and what he's able to do, 11 pass breakups, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the other corner is very good too, and gets, some of the air gets sucked out of the room by the conversation about Joey Porter Jr. So they're going to have to be sharp. They're going to have to run good routes. They're going to have to, CJ's going to have to be able to go through his progression, because there are just going to be times that guys are not going to be open. It's just the reality. And, not to bring up the 900-pound gorilla in the room, but when that happens, generally you expect your quarterback to tuck it and run. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not necessarily part of CJ's game plan, as we've seen. So, it's going to be interesting to see how Ohio State is going to be able to counter on that. Could Cade Stover or Mitch Rossi or somebody be that tight end outlet in those types of places and pick up 4, 5, 6 yard chunks of yardage instead of trying to force it in, when you look at the fact that CJ has thrown interceptions in his last 4 games.
Mm-hmm. And from one side of the field at the cornerback position to another, Ryan Day was asked about the return of Cam Brown. Is he going to be back this week? We didn't get a real definitive answer on that, but he did say it was not expected to be a long-term thing. So Cam Brown, put him down as a definite maybe for this weekend, I guess, and we'll see.
I would probably say that just based on the wording, as we learn to decipher Ryan Day's comments, if he were going to be back this week, I think we would have gotten something a little bit more along those lines.
Yep.
Oh, it's not long term. Sounds like week to week more to me, but that maybe we're reading it all wrong.
Yeah, that was kind of the vibe I got, but it wasn't definitive. So we'll see. We'll maybe get something out of folks on Wednesday night when we talk to the players, and if not, we'll certainly have the availability report before the game on Saturday. Josh Proctor, he did not play at all last week. Day said that was just an illness thing. It was not, he's not being benched. It was just he was unavailable. Without Josh Proctor there, Josh Proctor I think will be back. My impression was Josh Proctor will be back this week. Without Josh Proctor there, Lathan Ransom, Lathan Ransom is making the most of his opportunities this year. He was a big topic of conversation. He was just named a semifinalist for the Thorpe Award as the nation's best defensive back. He's someone who Jim Knowles, every time we talk to Jim Knowles about him, Jim Knowles has the same basic, I didn't know what the heck we were going to have with Lathan Ransom until very, very late in the process. Because remember, he suffered a very, very serious injury at that Rose Bowl and made a very quick recovery as far as those things go, and has really made the most of his opportunities this fall.
Yeah, over the last 2 seasons, the previous 2 seasons, we saw what the back end of this defense looked like without Josh Proctor. Very different this year with having somebody like Lathan Ransom who is game ready and performing at a very high level, and is just somebody that can be highly counted upon and just seems to fit his role in this Jim Knowles defense. You wonder, okay, if Josh Proctor is back, I mean, how do they sit there and split the snaps around to get everything right, to get the best 11 on the field at that time? Because right now, Lathan Ransom certainly is performing as one of the best guys out there.
We had a lot of, sometimes these press conferences are very just sort of like very game week focused sort of stuff, and a bunch of nuts and bolts. Today there was a lot more kind of broad topics, and topics about how they I asked Jim Knowles and Kevin Wilson about when they're watching film, what's the first thing you watch, and what's the first thing you're evaluating watch film. We'll do probably a bonus episode or one of our episodes later this week. We'll just play those for you because it was really fascinating answers, and I don't want to try and just give you a synopsis here and do those short shrift. But we got to talk to Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson about scripting plays at the beginning of the game. You'll hear teams sometimes, I think this was a big Bill Walsh thing, like you had the first 15 plays scripted, and you knew you were going to do this. And Ohio State doesn't quite do that. They sort of do something related, but they don't quite do that. So what do they do, and why do they not do the traditional scripting of the first 10 or 15 plays?
Well, Kevin Wilson said that he kind of has like run and pass down there just so you don't get into a run pass type of habit, but you get into, you script your plays, and then you got thinking, okay, well, we need to get this guy the ball, and we need to do this with this guy, we need to do that, and you kind of outthink yourself at that point, and it's more of a laundry list of trying to make sure that you're keeping everybody happy, and that you're not necessarily moving the ball down the field like you're supposed to. So it sounds like it's something that has gone away. I mean, obviously it is something that was very real. Kevin Wilson said that, there certainly was a point of his career where that was the norm, but that just does not seem to be the case anymore. You go in with a lot of ideas, but you don't necessarily go in with a hard, fast script because you just don't know what you're going to get. And just to go back to the Iowa game, Ohio State came in expecting, they saw on tape Iowa run 80-90% of their defense in quarters, and they get a lot of single high. You get stuck in this script, and if you become, captive by it, then what are you going to do?
Yeah, and just this is not a Ross Fulton show, but I will say, just if those terms sound familiar, but you're not quite placing them. Quarters is like the Chris Ash Ohio State defense. Single high is more like the Jeff Hafley, and then also the Kerry Combs and Matt Barnes type Ohio State defense. So a little different stylistically, and everything can you can attack every defense with something, but you're attacking those defenses with very different things. So if you get caught off guard, the concept of man beaters versus zone beaters and all that kind of stuff. Those are very different plays, and the things that are zone beaters will not work against man, and same thing for the quarters and single high.
Well, the one thing that I did take out of there, too, from what Jim Knowles talked to us about was if you want to be able to stop everything, you need 14 guys on defense. 14 is what it is. It's science. 14.
Yeah, that was a tremendous answer. I as we're standing here talking, I'm just going to have to do a clip show later this week with Jim Knowles and Kevin Wilson and Ryan Day answers. Knowles and Wilson in particular are just such good talkers and so interesting to listen to talking about football. All right, there we go. We just finished our editorial meeting. We're going to do a show later in the week with some of those, because I always come away from those press conferences feeling like I've learned something. Like, it's just really interesting. Kevin Wilson was asked about the process on the headsets as you're sending in plays. What's that process like? You'll hear about that later in this week as well. But until then, please make sure if you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. That will help other folks find these shows. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. We will have our pre and post game shows this weekend from Happy Valley and in the lovely Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And if you are listening on a podcast platform, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. Write us a little review as well if you can. Just say, hey, these guys are great. It'd be funny if you mention how handsome we are on a podcast platform, because that's where I look my best, on the podcast platforms. But whatever you can do to help spread the word for us on our YouTube channels, tell a friend, hey, you should subscribe to this podcast. You should watch this YouTube channel. Help us spread the word. We truly do appreciate all of your support. And finally, if you'd like to check out BuckeyeHuddle.com, this would be a tremendous time to do it. We are just about a month away from the Michigan game. I mean, almost to the day away from the Michigan game. So, get your membership at BuckeyeHuddle.com now, and that'll get you through the Michigan game. So that should be a very fun and eventful month in what is a very fun community. BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.